I tell you, the evidence is buried right down there. This may be the biggest thing that's ever happened.
Something crash lands in the desert in Arizona, and one man thinks he saw something, but everybody else thinks he's just making it up or he's going around the twist. Now that happened to me that one time I was on a plane and I saw something on the wing. Now it turns out it's called the jet engine, and they're actually quite common on planes, I hear. You know, you live and learn. In the 50s, something weird is happening when it came from outer space.
I know you're out there, hiding in the desert.
It Came from Outer Space, first released in 1953 as a 3D movie, was a fairly small-scale science fiction film that wasn't about wide-scale destruction or an alien invasion or killer monsters. There are aliens that are totally different from humans, but this ends up more being a story about tension with a side salad of paranoia.
Keep away, John Putnam.
The tension for me was when and if the film would ever actually get going, and then it does, but then abruptly ends. This is also a film that doesn't go where you think it's going to go, which of course is very nice. It gives the film something fairly unique for the time.
The way he kept looking into the sun without blinking.
So the film itself is mostly fine. It's going for a very slow build-up full of atmosphere, set in as fewer locations as possible, and it is enlivened by jump scares.
We have souls and minds, and we are good.
John Putnam is a writer and amateur astronomer living in Arizona. Every time he sells an article, he builds a little bit more of his desert house. His lady friend Ellen Fields is a school teacher, and she hangs around his place late at night without any regard to what the people in town might think. They need not worry. Putnam does seem a little reluctant to make any moves.
Would you keep this up if we were married?
Late at night, something crashes into the desert. The pair roust a local pilot who takes them to the crash site in the world's scariest flying vehicle, a combined helicopter, barber, and guillotine.
Holy cow!
At the crash site, Putnam investigates, where he finds some sort of man-made object with a hatch. Inside, he sees something, and of course something sees him. But a rock slide buries the object and nearly takes Putnam with it.
I tell you, I saw this thing.
Nobody believes Putnam. Ellen counsels him to keep quiet about what he saw, but pretty soon every person disbelieves Putnam's story. He has either invented the story for publicity, he's going loopy, or perhaps he just needs a really good excuse to get out of jury duty. Personally, my absolute favourite way to avoid jury duty is to accept, but ask if I can take selfies when they pull the lever.
Those fools.
For a major stretch of the film, John and Ellen seem to be driving backwards and forwards between the crash site and Putnam's home. It's the 50s, so there's none of that. That was right out. Besides, at the time, Anuna possibly referred to having ham sandwiches and potato salad for lunch. Putnam and Ellen do think they've seen something on the road, but then it's gone. They stop to talk to two local linesmen, Frank and George, to ask if they've seen anything weird. They've not seen anything, but there's a weird noise on the phone line.
And sometimes you think that the wind gets in the wires and hums and listens and talks.
For what seems like a fairly cheap 50s science fiction movie, the dialogue in this film is often way better than you would expect from the genre. It flows, and there are hardly any performances that have that stiffness to them. Soon the linesmen encounter the same strange light on the road, and, well, whenever we see this point of view bubble effect, something is going to happen. Something does happen, but it's not quite what you think. Putnam thinks the linesmen have been killed.
Something's happened to Frank.
He's dead.
But what he doesn't know is that they're actually both fine. Something has taken their form. For much of the movie, just using the word something does describe what we think is going on, but the something will end up being something that we hadn't considered. The local sheriff thinks Putnam's story is about as reliable as a boy with chocolate all over their face who denies any and all knowledge of what happened to the mud cake. The sheriff might have a thing for Ellen, or he's just worried her reputation in town will be tarnished by her association with Putnam, where there might be even more local gossip about ham sandwiches and potato salad at midday.
Did you hear? They washed it down with root beer.
Putnam and the sheriff see the linesman in town, which makes the sheriff even more distrustful of Putnam, while the writer confronts the linesman.
Your friends are alive. They will not be harmed if you do as we say.
Something's going seriously something here. More people are being somethinged by this mysterious something that is apparently something a lot of people. Ellen is also somethinged. These somethings do leave behind a glittery trail, like when Liberace ran a half marathon. Eventually the sheriff starts to believe something is at work, but Putnam thinks he's done a deal. No one will be harmed if they just leave the somethings alone till later tonight. However, if anybody does stick their nose into what the somethings are up to at the old mine, the somethings will kill the hostages. That's probably the first time in the film there's been a definite statement of any sort. Putnam sees the somethings as they really are, something that is, and correct me if I'm wrong, not from around these parts. Putnam just has to keep everybody away until the aliens repair their vessel, and then they'll leave without harming their hostages. Which does seem to be the same logic that my mechanic uses if I ever want to see my logbook again. The sheriff has had enough and organises a posse to attack the somethings at the mine, and Putnam races to get there first. He finally sees the aliens using the form of locals, including one who appears to be another Putnam.
1,000 years of reaching for the stars. Now at last we've conquered space.
The aliens now plan to destroy everything rather than be attacked by the posse, but instead Putnam talks them into freeing the hostages and leaving. He'll stop the attack. Before the sheriff and the locals can open fire, the alien vessel thunders overhead and everything's fine, so no biggie.
Well, what do you make of it?
I'm not sure yet.
It Came from Outer Space is one of those films that I'd been aware of forever, but the one time I distinctly remember it being shown on a Saturday afternoon when I was a kid, I just couldn't get into it. Watching it in full many decades later, I can see why I ended up changing the channel.
Did you see something, John?
No.
It's not a bad film, but it does have more padding than a stuntman who's got to fall down a flight of stairs. There's also the element of this film building towards something sinister when it really isn't.
No.
It's a short film, it's 80 minutes, and you feel almost every minute of it. Now, this is not me comparing the pacing of a film from the 50s to a 21st century movie, but just to films of the day or even television of a few years later.
Anything you say, boss.
There is at best 40 minutes of actual story and then 40 minutes of repetitious padding.
It's true, Matt.
I call it padding because most of it is just misdirection.
It's like some nightmare where you're waiting and hoping for it to be over. And
We have scene after scene of the aliens nabbing somebody, which just ends up being a kidnapping rather than some gruesome murder involving bubble bath and cotton candy. The fact that the aliens aren't malicious killers wasn't something that was common in 50 science fiction movies. For every film like The Day the Earth Stood Still, which had a benevolent alien, you had dozens more films where the aliens are just killing whatever. It Came from Outer Space wants to have its cake and eat it. It spends most of the time making you fear the aliens and wondering what they're up to, what their evil scheme is, and then the answer is, they've broken down by the side of the road and they're fixing their ride.
all we needed was time.
Barbara Rush had already appeared in When Worlds Collide, and later on would play a Batman villainess, Nora Clavicle.
We did not want to use violence.
Russell Johnson also appeared in 50 science fiction film This Island Earth, and despite a long career, would forever be known as the Professor on Gilligan's Island.
Your friend is all right.
Richard Carlson had mainly appeared in supporting roles, but had started to be offered the male lead in films with many horror and science fiction films under his belt.
I came here to warn you. I tried to stop them. You don't know how I tried.
His other major contribution to genre films was starring in The Creature from the Black Lagoon. To be clear, he did not play either the creature or the Black Lagoon. Carlson, of course, would be forever mixed up with actor Hugh Marlowe. They are different human beings, but to idiots like me, the producers really could have saved some money on the split screen effects by casting Marlowe. Though Marlowe and Carlson only apparently worked together once on a training film, but never on a major production.
All right. I'm not crazy and I'm not imagining.
So it's a pretty solid cast, some very good dialogue. What effects are there are mostly done very well. And of course the most intriguing thing is that it's not a typical 1950s alien killers on the loose film.
You really have to, Johnny.
I have to, Ellen.
The biggest effect was obviously liked so much that it was used twice within the first 5 minutes of the film, which is why the odd reflections of whatever was double exposed stand out so much. The split screen effects are done quite well, and the alien creature is relatively effective.
That much has been substantiated by witnesses.
The direction by Jack Arnold is fine, and the script by Arnold and Harry Essex does have a bit of a sparkle in a genre often known for cringeworthy dialogue and very flat performances. Not here.
Wouldn't it be a fine trick if I weren't really John Putnam at all? Something from another world come here to give you a lot of false leads.
The original story was based on a film treatment by Ray Bradbury, but by the time this was filmed and edited, the 80-minute film does seem to spend much of its runtime in a holding pattern until it's time to wrap everything up.
Are we right in just sitting by?
The film brought back $1.6 million off an $800,000 budget, which at the time would have seen it turn a small profit. It Came from Outer Space was one of the earliest 3D releases from the wave of stereoscopic movies released in the 50s, though no one's throwing javelins or custard pies at the camera or anything like that. Instead, we mostly get shots from the point of view of the aliens, where it looks like they killed some victim, but of course they haven't. However, the extra visual dimension doesn't really give the basic story much of a lift.
But I tell you, I saw a ship.
You saw something that looked like a ship. You can't prove it, John.
There was a mostly forgotten television movie sequel/remake in the 80s, but this film from the 50s, while not having that many major iconic moments, is definitely one to watch if you're on a 50s science fiction binge. Just don't expect an awful lot from it. As something that's influenced pop culture in any major way, the title is the most obvious thing. It's a movie title that screams 1950s science fiction film. Aside from the scale, it's not hard to see an episode of, say, The Outer Limits or The Twilight Zone just a few years later being able to tell this sort of story in far less time.
It's a cookbook!
And still have time for Rod Serling's slow-motion suicide note at the end.
Great tobaccos make it a wonderful smoke.
It Came from Outer Space is interesting in several ways. It's interesting because its premise is not like the bulk of 50s movies, but it also could seem anticlimactic or a bait and switch.
Look.
What's that?
Personally, I love the fact the aliens weren't looking to invade or kill, though their rationale for taking hostages holds less water than a colander. I also like the dialogue that seemed to have been written by somebody who understood how to use language, rather than someone who was bashing out scripts on autopilot.
Time or terrible things will happen. Things so terrible you have yet to dream of them.
It's just the thing that counts against the film is the leaden pacing, with more padding than a department store Santa who'd gone on a crash diet but really desperately needed the Santa gig.
You've got nothing to blame yourself about, John. What else could you do?
It came from outer space. It borrowed some people for a bit, and then it went back to outer space.
They'll be back.
If you enjoyed this review, please like and subscribe, leave a comment below, or check out some of our other videos.